Say the World, an international writing podcast. I'm Mike McGinnis, Communications Coordinator at the International Writing Program, and most recently the author of the novel Drowning Practice.
And I'm Christopher Merrill, Director of the International Writing Program and author most recently of a book-length poem titled On the Road to Lviv.
The substance of today's episode is going to be an interview with the very talented Egyptian novelist, editor, book reviewer, Mansoura Ez-Eldin. First, we want to let you know about our Between the Lines program. Between the Lines is a creative writing summer camp for young writers who will be between the ages of 15 and 18 years old this summer. The program brings together US-based students and students from around the world to learn together from our renowned staff of internationally acclaimed writers.
And this is the first year since 2019 that the program takes place entirely in person on the University of Iowa campus. There will be two sections of Between the Lines. The first will run from June 9th through June 22nd, and the second will run from June 30th through July 14th.
The reason that we're talking about this now is that applications are open for US-based students, and they should be open by the time that you're hearing this for international students as well. The list of participating countries is different each year. This year, the list is Algeria, Angola, Bangladesh, Burundi, Cambodia, Cameroon, France, Hungary, India, Laos, Morocco, Mozambique, Pakistan, Qatar, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Slovakia, Sri Lanka, United Arab Emirates, and Vietnam. You can learn how to apply at bit.ly/BTL24. That's all lowercase, bit.ly/BTL24. And that list is, of course, there for your easy reference, just in case you didn't have your pencil out while I was reading that off.
And in the course of this interview, Mansoura speaks at some length about the delicate art of mentorship, which gives me a chance to say something about my mentor, the wonderful poet Brewster Giesland, and editor of the influential symposium, The Creative Process. I remember so clearly the ways in which he would go through different drafts of poems that he'd written over the course of a very long life, show me the changes he was making line to line, year to year, and I learned more about how to make a poem from his attempt to just show what it was he had learned in what he called a long life of discovery. That's how we pass on this trade of writing.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how much I've told you about this. It feels like it's probably come up because I like to explain this to people almost as a warning. But you may remember that I was homeschooled from kindergarten through basically up until undergraduate. The first time that I was in a formal classroom with an actual teacher was when I went to get my undergraduate degree in creative writing. And so I came there and I had a bunch of people there who were really important to me. Dan Barden, who still works there, Robert Stapleton, who's still there, Susan Neville, who's a professor emeritus now. But they were all massively important to me because they were sort of helping me to just like learn how to be not only a functional writer, but like a student and a human being all at once. I had to catch up on a lot of things. And I remember at one point, Dan Barden said to students in a class that I was in that I had been raised by wolves, and what they should do if they wanted to like have some really good writing was they should follow me around, listen to what I talked about, and then they should do writing on that basis. And like what good that did me was not clear, but it's that was his advice. And then later he also gave me advice that I could use for my own work that was really important.
What a great story. Do you want to say where that was?
Oh yeah, that was at Butler University in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
That was where I went. That was where I met my partner. It's a place I think of fondly.
Yeah. No, those are the formative experiences when we find that teacher. I'm always thinking of, I had as a teacher, William Matthews, who has a poem in which he says, "And while I'm at it, I'd like to thank my teachers, though not all of them, and they know who they are."
Yes, there is sort of an anti-mentor in my life who kind of ticked me off and has had to send me a congratulatory email, and the dark pleasure I took in very magnanimously replying thank you. That was an all-time high. And with that confession out of the way, let's talk to Mansoura.
بساتين البصرة.
The orchards of Basra.
بالأمس أكلت قمراً، أتذكر شارعاً تناثر فيه بضعة أفراد كأنهم كومبارس في فيلم صامت بطولته لي وحدي.
Yesterday I ate a moon. I remember a street on which a few people were scattered like extras in a silent film in which I was the only hero, spying on them through a hole in a wall separating me from life.
أنا المتلصص عليهم عبر قوة في جدار يفصلني عن الحياة. وأتذكر أنني رفعت رأسي نحو السماء فرأيت قمراً مزدوجاً أو للدقة قمراً ينبعث انعكاسه بجواره بحيث يلتصقان معاً كما لو أن هناك مرآة خفية تربط بينهما.
I remember raising my head toward the sky and seeing a double moon, or to be more precise, a moon with its own reflection beside it, the two clinging together as if there was a hidden mirror joining them.
بعدها لمحت انعكاسين آخرين لهما، أحدهما يميناً والآخر يساراً. اندهشت لأن سمائي تسكنها 6 أقمار، أو بالأحرى 3 أزواج من الأقمار، لكنها كانت دهشة متحفظة تناسب أن أفتح باب شقتنا لأفاجأ بقطة سوداء تنتظر على الدرج.
Afterwards, I noticed two other reflections of the pair, one on the right and the other on the left. I was surprised that my sky should have 6 moons in it, or rather 3 pairs of moons, but it was only a mild surprise, like opening the door to our apartment and finding a black cat waiting on the stairs.
My name is Mansoura Ez-Eldin. I am a writer from Egypt. I was born in the Nile Delta in a tiny village. And I moved to Cairo when I was 18 years old to live on my own and to study journalism and begin my career in writing. I was surrounded by many wonderful storytellers when I was young. My grandfather, my mother, my uncles, they used to tell me a lot of wonderful stories about the goblins, ghosts, and fairies that inhabit the Nile. So when I was a child, I didn't know where reality ends and where the fictional begins. So this influenced me a lot when I became a writer. In my writing, I sort of merge between dreams and reality and trying to make use of this wonderful heritage of oral tales and stories. And I'm also influenced a lot by the Islamic heritage about metaphysics, dreams, and all these fantastical tales and heritage. When I write, I try to make use of this of the old Arab tradition of storytelling and mix it with postmodern techniques of storytelling. Till now, I have 10 books, 6 novels, 3 collections of short stories, and a book of travel writing about my 2 visits to China. I won a lot of literary awards and was shortlisted to a lot of literary awards as well, including the Arabic Booker Prize and the Sheikh Zayed Award for Literature. And my most recent work, Basatin al-Basra, or the Orchards of Basra, is shortlisted now for the Arabic Literature Award in France.
Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate the chance to talk with you.
Thank you for having me.
You mentioned the importance of dreams and sort of the space in between reality and the sort of dream space. And that was something that I did want to ask you about. I read that there was an early period, there was an early encounter early in your university career where you got a copy of the book that was mentioned in this passage that we read, the Great Book of Interpretation of Dreams. And what I read was that you were consulting it frequently and spending a lot of time with it. I just wonder if you could talk about your relationship with this book and what it was like then, and maybe how the relationship has changed now as you've written about it.
Okay. When I moved to Cairo, this city was quite intimidating for me. I was a country girl who moved alone, and this is to live alone, and this is not usual or common in Egypt, especially back in the 90s. So I want to like tame the city through walking its streets and writing about it, about the city and the streets and everything I encountered there. So one day I found a copy of this book, old book, and without thinking, I bought it. And where I, from my first reading, I felt like I'm captivated, you know, because this is, I didn't feel that it's not only a book about dreams. It is a fantastic piece of art, you know, because in the Islamic culture, when we interpret a dream, we sometimes like, it's like a study in language, the nature of language. So I made this dream about angels who are picking jasmine from Al-Basra, as a famous city in Iraq. And I knew that I'll write a novel or something in the future about this dream. This dream stayed with me for about 25 years. And when I was in Shanghai, 2018, I began writing this novel. Um, this dream is very fleeting in the book. No one knows anything about the one who's about the dreamer. So I tried to imagine a life for this dreamer, you know. So I invented some fictional character called Yazid ibn Abi, who dreamed this dream and went to Al-Hassan al-Basri, and I was faithful to the interpretation that was mentioned in the book. But I invented another character who lives, his name is Hisham Khattab, and he is the narrator of this text that we have just read. Hisham Khattab lives in Cairo, between Cairo and Mania in Egypt nowadays, and he believes that he is Yazid ibn Abi. And he lived in the old Basra 13 centuries ago. So the book is about this. And when I researched it, I know Al-Hassan al-Basri is very famous sheikh and imam in the Islamic history. And he was very close to Wasil ibn Ata. He was like the mentor of Wasil ibn Ata. Wasil ibn Ata is the leader of a philosophical Islamic school. This Islamic school was very progressive. They questioned everything. They questioned the nature of God. They asked very challenging questions about the nature of Quran. Is Quran invented or is it divine? And you know, but this school was repressed, and no one talks a lot about it now. So I wanted to write about this school of philosophy. And it was a hard mission for me because I needed to work a lot and search a lot. But I love these challenges. Yeah, and there is a chapter in the novel which is narrated by Wasil ibn Ata. Wasil ibn Ata was very eloquent man and thinker, but he wasn't able to pronounce the letter R. So he avoided it altogether. And in the chapter which he is the narrator in, I avoided this letter in writing. So I love to play with writing, you know.
Yeah, it's great to have that constraint. That was something that I was thinking about too when I was reading the sample that you provided, because I think that when you write about dreams, there is a tendency to feel a lack of constraint that can be a challenge in itself, right? There's sort of like anything could happen next. I could eat the moon, right?
Yeah.
And then and then so the question becomes, what are the constraints that are going to be productive for writing in that sort of mode? So that's one constraint that was really productive. I'm curious if there are other constraints or rules that you try to follow when you're writing in sort of that dream space or that mode that are productive and helpful for you.
Okay, when writing the first manuscript, I try to liberate myself totally. I try to go after my imagination to follow it. And when I began writing the second and third manuscript, I began to put my hand on the main questions of the novel. So I research more and more. But every sentence in this introduction or the opening of the novel has something to do with the plot of the novel. In the Islamic interpretation of dreams, eating the moon has something to do with the mother. And there is a very complex relationship between the narrator and his mother in this novel. And by the end of the novel, this back sentence will be clearer.
So did the research involve traveling to Basra or thinking traveling into the historical reaches of Basra?
I wish I was able to travel to Basra. I was invited in 2017 to go by a German organization to mentor a creative writing workshop. But Iraq didn't give me the visa due to some political problems with
Sure.
Egypt. So I didn't travel, but I was writing about a city that doesn't exist now. You know, the old Basra was destroyed centuries ago, and the new one is not the same city. So I relied on the old books and a lot of writing about the city, how they used to live, and mainly about this school of philosophy and the Islamic philosophy in general, because Iraq, Basra, and Baghdad were like the two cradles of Islamic philosophy.
So out of necessity, you invent anew.
Yeah, a new city, sort of, yeah.
It's interesting to me that you fell into this book about the great interpretation of dreams. I think around the same time that Mahfouz started writing his Dreams of Departure.
Yes, yes.
When we think about the great Egyptian storytelling tradition, were those dreams at all useful to you in thinking about your journey as a writer?
And Naguib himself was a great source of inspiration for me. But in my dealing with dreams, I rely more than him on the Islamic culture, you know. But Naguib himself was like an idol for me. I was a little girl who lives in a very isolated village, and when he won Nobel, this was for me, wow, I can do it, at least I can dream of doing it one day. And when I was a child, I used to read English, translated English and Russian novels. So I had like a sort of naive belief that novels should be written by Western writers, and they should be set in cities like London, Moscow, St. Petersburg, you know. And then I came across Naguib Mahfouz and read his novels to discover, wow, there is a good Egyptian novelist who writes about people who resembles my family, my neighbors, you know.
And a great literary city like Cairo.
Yes, yes. I knew Cairo at first through his writing, and there was a very strange coincidence. My first day at Cairo University marked the day Naguib Mahfouz was near fatally step. This was my first day at Cairo University. And I read this as a sort of warning directed to me. You want to be a writer? See, this is the fate of writers, something like this.
And he was in such pain for the rest of his life that he wrote those dreams because he could only write for about 30 minutes
Yes,
a day, I
exactly,
think. Right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But again, he made a virtue out of necessity, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the experience of reading books in translation, and I have some jealousy when I hear that. Although it's a kind of frustrating dynamic, right? So the thing that I feel the frustration of is, growing up in the U.S. reading fiction, there is a cultural starvation, really, right? Like I was not reading things in translation; I was reading things written in English that were from, written by people in the US or in England. That was basically it, right? That was where I started.
Mm.
And so we're sort of missing out. And at the same time, while we're not necessarily reading people from other places as much as we should be, we're sending stuff out everywhere, right? And creating that impression that, yes, this is what literature is supposed to be. It's supposed to be written in English. It's supposed to be about New York City,
Mm.
or places like that. And so I wondered, because there was an interview, this was all the way back in 2011, where you spoke to the Rumpus and you talked about the sort of situation of writers in Arabic. And I can sort of summarize what you saw the situation as at the time, but I don't want to hold you responsible for like what you described it as then. I'm curious like how you feel now, if things have changed in the past 10 years as far as the position of Arabic writing in translation around the world.
Would you please remind me
Yes.
of what I because I
Yes,
don't
yes,
remember.
yes, absolutely. So what you said at the time was at least as they recorded it. I can't tell why Arab writers are not widely read in America. The American publishing market seems to be really tough, especially for foreign literature. On the other hand, most of the Arab writers don't have agents, and Arabic publishers in general are not professional enough and don't work on promoting their publications
I
outside the
see.
Arab world. And then you went on to say that there was also an issue of not always the best writing being selected because Western publishers and readers tended to kind of pick and choose looking for specific themes because we were sort of saying like, well, writing from this region should really just be social or political and it shouldn't have broader artistic aims or larger artistic aims.
I think the situation is much better now. Now we have a lot of Arab writers who are very famous internationally, like Khalid Khalifa, Jo Harsi won the International Book Prize, and many others. And I hope that in the future, where more Arab writers will be widely known in the West and in the East as well, not only the West. But I noticed that most of the times, Western publishing houses prefer they don't prefer the experimental writing. So many wonderful Arabic novels are not translated just because they are daring, artistically daring and experimental. I hope this will change soon as well.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's improved some, but it's not surprising to me to hear that that's sort of another step that is maybe considered a little too much by some publishers. I'm curious if there are particular writers that haven't made that leap, maybe because of that challenge that you'd like to see people be more aware of.
In Egypt, for example, we have Mustafa Zikri, Yasser Abdel Hafiz. One of his novels is translated, but I think he deserves to be more known. And Muhammad Khair, he was here last year. Also, Abdullah Nasser from Saudi Arabia, and many writers from Lebanon, the late Jabbour Douehi, and Anis Rafi from Morocco.
Yeah, I actually read Mohammed Khair's novel "Slipping" in
Yes.
translation after he because he read from it while he was here last year, and I really loved the reading. And I did have that experience of it was translated, it was beautifully translated. I was basically following it, but because it did have a slipperiness to it, a surrealism to it, it was really beautiful. But the whole time I was sort of haunted by the knowledge of how much I was missing about what was so great about it.
This is a problem of experimental
Yes.
or uh, ambiguous writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like him. While he was here, he taught a songwriting workshop.
Yeah.
He's a larger than life character. I wonder if you could tell us a little something about how the literary culture has changed since the events of 2011 in the Arab Spring. Has a different kind of space opened up for Egyptian writers?
Yeah. I think there are positive changes and negative changes at the same time. After the revolution, everyone was talking about the writers should write about so and so and so. Egyptian novelists should write about, or not should, must write about the revolution, about the change, the social changes. I don't believe in that when it comes to literature, because every writer should be free to write about whatever he wants. And a huge historical event like a revolution needs time to be digested and to be understood. You can't just write while the event is still in progress. So we had a lot of novels about politics and about the revolution, but they are not good enough, you know. And on the other hand, the situation now concerning censorship is not good. So I myself have a novel that I wrote in 2017, and till now I can't publish it because I know it will not be published easily in Egypt now. So I keep it in my drawer. Maybe,
Is that because of the subject matter or
yeah, yeah.
because of the
It's about the revolution, but not in a direct way.
In a similar vein, on my first trip to Cairo,
Mm.
I had a very interesting conversation with a scholar who was talking about the differences between classical Arabic and more demotic forms of the language. And he was arguing that Arabic writers, needed to find ways to write in a more colloquial fashion. I wonder if that continues to be a subject of discourse and where you might
Yeah,
stand on
yeah,
this.
it is always a subject of discourse. But in Egypt, we are more progressive than other Arab countries because we don't have this discrimination between the Egyptian dialect and the standard Arabic. The Egyptian writers are more daring and experimental when it comes to language, to the degree that some writers and critics in the Arab world in countries like Saudi Arabia or Lebanon or Syria consider that uh, we humiliate Arabic language sometimes. But I don't believe in that. I feel that experimenting with language is very important, very vital for any language, But sometimes it's very dangerous or challenging when it comes to an old language like Arabic language, It is like a holy language, the language of Quran. So sometimes you should be a bit careful when playing with it. In my novel, The Shards of Basra, juxtaposed many different styles of Arabic language. One of them trying to be close to the old Arabic language in the time of Al-Jahiz and the classical Arabic writers, and some of them standard Arabic in modern Egypt, and some of them, one of the narrators use the Egyptian dialect. So I prefer writing in the classical Arabic or the standard Arabic, but sometimes I love when the novel I am writing allows me to do so, to mix a lot of styles and ways of writing.
Ernest Hemingway said that Mark Twain was really the start of American literature. And in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, he said in the preface that he was happy to employ a half a dozen different dialects of Southwest Missouri in his drive to get at how people actually spoke.
Do you know? Do you know what? He was one of my idols when I was a child in Cairo, in my small village. Because when I read his novels, I felt that the Mississippi resembles the Nile, and as if he is writing about these children, I looked like me. لم أنتبه إلى أن سماء ليلتي الماضية تلونت بمسحة تركوازية تليق بحجر كريم إلا لاحقا، وحينها فقط خطر لي أنني أكلت القمر.
I didn't notice until later that the sky the previous night was colored with a touch of turquoise worthy of a precious stone, and only then did it occur to me that I had eaten the moon. I had a loaf of bread in my hand on which I had put the moon, or was it a boiled egg?
كان في يدي رغيف خبز وضعت فوقه القمر، أم أنه كان بيضة مسلوقة؟ ولففت الرغيف وبدأت في قضمه حتى انتهيت منه، ولم أجرؤ بعدها على النظر لأعلى. خيم الظلام فاستنتجت أن ضوء حياتي قد تلاشى مع القمر المأكول. غير بعيد عن الجدار ذي القوة المطلة على الشارع تمددت فوق مقعد حجري تظلله شجرة زهورها أشبه بأجراس برتقالية يطغى حضورها على مشهد غابت عنه الأوراق الخضراء.
I folded the bread and started to eat until I had finished it. I didn't dare look upward afterwards. Dark settled in, and I concluded that the light of my life had disappeared with the eaten moon. I stretched out on a stone basin, not far from the wall with the hole looking out over the street. It was shaded by a tree with flowers like orange bells, whose presence dominated a scene from which green leaves were absent.
رن في رأسي صوت أليف يخبرني بأن الشجرة اسمها بومباكس وإزهارها يسبق تجدد خضرتها، فلم أعرف من أين جاءتني هذه المعلومة. كنت فقط مدركا لدفء متغلغل في أحشائي، كما لو أن قمرا ينير عتمتها الداخلية.
A familiar voice rang in my head, telling me that the tree was called a bombax and that it flowered before it became green again. I don't know where this piece of information came to me from. I was just aware of a warmth deep inside me, as if a moon was lighting up my inner darkness.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your sort of your day job. As I understand it, you're the managing editor and book review editor for, and please feel free to correct my pronunciation, Akhbar Al-Adab.
أخبار الأدب، نعم.
And so you've said some interesting things about the role of criticism in literary life, and I wonder what sort of writing you are focused on publishing in that context, and how you see the relationship of that work to your novels and fiction.
I am the book review editor in أخبار الأدب since 2003. And it's the beginning from 2005, I sort of edit a supplement about publishing in general in Arab world and elsewhere. So I consider myself in direct contact with the publishing scene in the Arab world. Now it's very different from when it used to be in the beginning of this century. No one is interested in literary criticism now because they know about the books from Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, you know. But we continue to write about new books, new novels. When I became a book reviewer at first, I tried not to just rely on my taste as a writer because, you know, when I write as a writer, I have a lot, yeah, I might not like the direct novels or the realistic novel, for example. So, no, I didn't want to only publish reviews about the books that I like. I relied on a lot of other reviewers and other critics to try as much as I can to reflect the diversity of the rich literary scene in Egypt and in the Arab world. But now I feel the situation is a bit chaotic because of Facebook and social media. And, you know, sometimes some writers pay to have positive reviews for groups on Facebook. And I don't think this will benefit anyone, including these writers themselves. Yeah.
So, what do you imagine the critic's role to be in such a case?
I think they should continue their work regardless of anything else. And some critics, some Egyptian critics, are writing about this phenomenon. You know, uh, they are trying to analyze what is happening and these changes. But okay, maybe the ordinary readers don't pay attention to what is written, but I think it will be very vital in the future when we try to look back at this era, for example, and know what is written and how the critics dealt with it.
The failure of some critics to deal with it honestly and at a level of intellectual engagement
Yeah,
that could spur different kinds of thinking,
yeah,
right?
it's like the days of criticism now.
Yeah.
In Egypt. Do you have the same problem here?
Oh, we have a lot of social media.
You know, I feel like you've talked about in interviews, like a 2019 one with Arab Lit, a turn toward a focus on like entirely positive criticism, and I think that there's a lot of that here too. I mean, I feel like the general feeling here is that because it is so hard to get any attention for a book to begin with, and because the default is that a book is going to disappear, right? If you're going to talk about it, you might as well choose one to talk about that you like, which I do find. I think there's a truth to that, right? Like there's a reality to it is helpful to, if you want to help books, focus on praising the ones that you would like to see thrive and the writers that you would like to see thrive. But there's a lot lost in that, right? There's a whole category of like thinking and conversation that becomes really difficult to have. And I would say essentially doesn't happen publicly. I don't know if you feel the same, but like
No.
I think it basically doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, but do you know what? I am a book review editor in one of the most prestigious literary newspaper in the region, but I'm trying as well to make use of social media. I write a lot about what I read in social media, on Twitter and Facebook, and much to my surprise, the publishers themselves tell me when I write about certain books, the sales increase. So we can make use of it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not the destiny or our fate to just complain, you know. We can make this platforms work in a more just way, or a more, at least from our point of view. I try to write about it, like short reviews, or just say that you should pay attention to this young writer, for example. I think it's one of my duties.
You can make or break a book.
No, 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 no. I can't claim this. No, and I hope not.
That's not the goal.
I look at myself as a reader, an avid reader.
Yeah. So somewhere between a social media enterprise that looks like a publicity machine
Yes.
and something like hatchet jobs, there must be some happy middle where you can speak with some level of seriousness about why a book is important, what its defining features might be, and what its shortcomings might be.
Yeah.
I wondered too, in reading you talking about what is useful and exciting in literary criticism, and maybe the answer to this is no, which is totally fine. But I was curious if there is an example of being on the receiving end of criticism or review that changed something about how you thought about your work or how you worked in the future. Is that something that you've had the benefit of?
Yeah, of course. Especially in the beginning of my career. When I began, I had a lot of encouragement, you know, from some of the most important writers in Egypt. And I was, I came to Cairo without knowing anything, without any connections. I was just trying to try it, and I didn't even believe that I might be a writer, really. So, because I was an avid reader, and I knew that I was writing very naive short stories, I knew that at the beginning. So I kept writing and keeping my short stories in my drawer until someone, a colleague of mine at the university, knew that I am writing short stories, and he was the one who used to win every competition at the university. And he got bored and wanted some competition. So he asked me to give him one of my short stories because he is curious to read it, and I gave it to him, and he submitted it to a literary prize without telling me. And much to my surprise and his surprise as well, I won the first place, and he came in the second place. This was my beginning with writing because the jury members helped me to publish it, and I knew a lot of very famous writers. They encouraged me, but there was one particular critic who told me I am not good enough, and I opted to believe him. You know, and I think it was clever from me of me to believe him because this made me improve myself. He told me, do you know why they are very happy with your writing and always encouraging you? And I asked, why? I don't know. He told me, because they saw you, themselves in your writing. You are like imitating them. And they are happy that they have such a good pupil, you know. You should find your own voice. And he was a very honest critic. And I was lucky to listen to him and try to find my own voice, you know? So criticism can help writers to, and sometimes negative criticism is more important than positive.
So, what did it take for you to find your own voice? How did you go about doing that?
I try to write about what interests me most. You know, as I told you, I was raised in a very like mythological village where dreams and reality were inseparable. You know, so I tried to write about this. I wanted at first to imitate them. They were writing good novels and short stories, but they wrote about the world as they see it, you know. I used to see world differently. For me, ghost stories were not just stories. They were like daily life details for me due to my upbringing. So I believed this fictional reality, or I don't know how to describe it, but I believed it and wrote about it the same way I listened to the stories of my grandmother and grandfather. And also, I tried to have my own style in writing. Since I was a kid, I was fascinated by the pre Islamic poetry, for example. And I used to memorize it without fully understanding it. So I worked in my language to try to play with the language. Step by step, I hope that I found my voice. But when I began writing, most of the Egyptian writing was realistic. So I began to mix fantastical aspect with reality, and some writers didn't like this because it was like not realistic enough, and they used to only respect the pure reality. But for me, it wasn't unrealistic. This is reality. When we talk about dreams, our dreams are part of our reality. They are part of our identity, our fears, our even our hallucinations are part of our characters and our personal history. So when I write about this, I write about reality. I don't remember who said this. Maybe Danilo Kish, the Yugoslav, is a Serbian writer. I love him a lot.
My hero.
Yeah. When I went to when I stayed in Paris for 3 months, I used to visit his building yeah, every time because I love him. He said once that reality is the unseen. You know, our dreams, our hallucinations. And this is part of our reality, and this is how I see reality. And I try to write it the way I see it, and the way I interact with it.
It occurred to me that you have a journalism background
Yeah.
and write about sometimes fantastic things in a very clear and accessible fashion. That's not unlike the wonderful Italian novelist, story writer Dino Buzzati, who was also a journalist, and he wrote the most fantastic stories in the clearest possible, even simplest language, understanding that there is no divide between, in his case, the surreal and the real,
Yes.
and that language may be the bridge between those two worlds. Is that part of your process?
Yes, of course. And also, we can remember in this context Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He was a journalist as well.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
he once talked about that journalism helped him to be convincing, to be able to convince the reader of what he is writing, regardless of how fantastical it was. So I believe that journalism helped me in the same way. How to write about sometimes very fantastical and maybe even unbelievable things in a convincing way.
And also on deadline.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. It helped me to write daily as well, and to be able to concentrate under pressure.
Under pressure,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about your experience here in Iowa since you've joined the International Writing Program Fall Residency. How things have been going, what your experience has been.
Okay, I feel myself lucky to be here with you. I really love the city. I've just said that I'm a farm girl, so I'm very happy to be here because Iowa has a lot of green areas, a lot of trees, a lot of flowers. I am fascinated with all this. This is my first time to see a black flower here in Iowa. And also, it was very enriching to me to talk and discuss writing with other writers from all over the world. I feel that I am living now in sort of shelters for writers and writing. I was very excited to the degree that distracted me from writing. So I'll try to concentrate more in my writing during the next weeks. Also, I noticed that your corn is quite short.
It's short. I didn't know this.
No,
Could it be taller?
Egyptian corn is very tall, and it caused me nightmares when I was a child because I once got lost in a cornfield.
Yeah.
So being here in Iowa reminded me of these nightmares.
Well, I think actually this year that is a function of drought because often the corn is quite high, but this year the drought has been so severe that it has not grown as well as the farmers would like it to.
Yeah, but I'm very happy to be here, and I think it will be very fruitful for me as a writer, and it will enrich my experience.
If you don't mind me asking, I'm curious with all the talk of dreams whether you remember what you've been dreaming while you've been here, if things have changed being in Iowa as far as the things you're dreaming about.
I always dream about my kid. He is 11 years old. Maybe I feel guilty because I left him in Cairo. So I dream about him, and I dreamed about butterflies because before coming here, I wrote a text about American butterflies, and it will be part of Infinite Dream Festival, and I'm so excited. لمست لحظتها جوهري الورقي. لست ذلك العاطل خائب الرجاء الساكن في كلمات أمي ليلى حين كانت توجه لي شتائمها، ثم إنها ليست أمي من الأساس. أخبرني القمر المستقر في أعماقي بهذا وغيره الكثير.
At that moment, I connected with my paper self. I wasn't that hopeless, useless fellow who inhabited the words of my mother Layla when she directed her curses at me. Then again, she wasn't my mother at all. The moon that had settled deep inside me told me this and a lot more.
حثني على تجاهل الصداع والحموضة والدوار، أعادني إلى هويتي وإلى حلم غابر كنت بطله ورائيه، حلم ربما صادفه بعضكم بين دفتي تفسير الأحلام الكبير المنسوب للإمام محمد بن سيرين دون أن ينشغل بمن رآه وقصه على الحسن البصري.
It urged me to ignore the headache and the fever and the nausea. It returned me to my identity and to a past dream in which I was both the subject and the dreamer, a dream that some of you may perhaps have come across between the covers of the great interpretation of dreams attributed to Imam Muhammad ibn Sirin without being bothered about who saw it, and told it to Al-Hassan al-Basri.
Say the World, an international writing podcast, is a production of the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa. IWP programming is primarily funded by the University of Iowa and the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, with additional funding provided by organizations like the Doris Duke Foundation, as well as donors like you. If you'd like to donate to the IWP, go to bit.ly/IWP-support. Links to further information and additional credits for this episode are in the show notes.